I really don't know how to start this video. Just say who you are and introduce the topic. Okay, well, my name is Smudged, and recently I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. For the love of God, could you sound any less confident in yourself? Well, this is the first time I'm allowed to make a video on the channel because you've been keeping me on the back burner. If you think you have problems, I haven't been allowed to be on camera in forever. Alright, everyone just shut up. I'm dwindling in views and I'm allowing you the opportunity to have a video on the channel. Just say what you're here to do and then get on with it. Okay, as I was saying, my name is Smudge. Today we're doing a review on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Before we get into it, I should say there are spoilers in this video. Honestly, if you haven't seen this film, I highly recommend you do so. This is truly a film that can only be fully appreciated on the big screen. With that out of the way, let's begin. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed by Quentin Tarantino, is probably one of my favorite period pieces I've ever had the chance to watch. There's an interesting technique done in this movie that I haven't seen in many other films. In order to play into the story of this washed-up 60s actor, the movie replicates earlier decades of film techniques. From the film grain to the editing to the cinematography, you can tell the era in which each fabricated TV show Rick Dalton stars in is supposed to be set. They even change the aspect ratio for certain scenes, such as in the beginning when they're setting up the personality of our two main protagonists. It genuinely looks and feels like you're watching an old 50s western. There's also painstaking attention to detail done for each and every background set. Every car in the movie is 100% true to the late 60s, at least as far as I can tell. It's also interesting because a core component of this movie is the amount of hitchhiking there is. From a modern day perspective, it seems reckless and dumb, though this one aspect of the film actually makes the world seem more believable. This movie is listed on IMDb as a comedy drama, though I'd argue that you can't really pigeonhole this movie into any singular genre. There's aspects of Quentin Tarantino's classic style of violence and action, but more importantly, there's this one extremely powerful scene. When Cliff Booth, the best friend and stuntman for Rick Dalton, enters the Manson family camp, and everything from the score to the acting makes you extremely uneasy, partially due to the fact that Brad Pitt's performance as Cliff Booth is so intriguing and enticing that you don't want this character to die. Which brings me to another point. The bromance between Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth is so believable that you would have thought that these people had been best friends for decades. I would definitely agree, however, with IMDb that this movie is a comedy. Very few films make me audibly laugh in theaters, but to be quite honest, this one had really good punchlines. Speaking of punchlines, the action in this movie is unbelievably great, partially because it's so jarring when it happens. The majority of the film is focused around Rick Dalton's sudden realization that he's a has-been, making you feel the amount of stress and sadness he's feeling. But a few scenes later, it cuts to Cliff Booth punching the teeth out of a Charles Manson follower. There was actually some controversy regarding this movie, however. Surprisingly, not surrounding the heavy usage of the Manson family as a story device, rather surrounding Cliff Booth beating up Bruce Lee. I'm not entirely sure why people are upset about this. It's almost immediately revealed that it's all in Cliff Booth's imagination, which is a way to show that Cliff Booth is pretty arrogant in his abilities, going so far as to imagine him throwing Bruce Lee into a car so hard that he crushes the door. Mike Mo's performance as Bruce Lee is fantastic. He's probably one of the funniest characters who has the least amount of screen time. One thing of note is that this movie benefits heavily from its usage of multiple storylines. Not a lot of directors can really pull off having multiple different arcs, but Quentin Tarantino does an excellent job. The only drawback to this is that you feel every second of the movie, which isn't entirely bad because it's so engaging, but it definitely feels a lot longer than what the runtime actually is. There's also another controversy that popped up regarding the gruesome ending of the film. Sharon Tate was murdered by the Manson family in 1969. In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, however, the Manson family is going to go attack Sharon Tate, though instead decide to attack Rick Dalton. Because Cliff Booth is ultimately the one who kills the intruders, there are people saying that this is misogynistic revisionist history. Why? Because Sharon Tate should have killed them, not Cliff Booth, a fictional character. I really can't tell why people are upset about this. Sharon Tate played such a small role in this movie that I'm not exactly sure why people think it would be more impactful for the side character to ultimately kill her attackers. I don't see what's misogynistic about this in the slightest. Honestly, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a really good film, and I highly recommend you go watch it in theaters. I didn't talk too much about the score or the cinematography, but as always with Quentin Tarantino movies, it is spectacularly spot on. And I'm not talking about the tracks that they chose to use from the 60s. The actual composed work made for this movie is spectacular at making you feel certain emotions, which is honestly something that all filmmakers should strive for. That being said, my name is Smudged. I hope you liked my review. That's all I got.